With inflation at a 30-year high and turkey prices soaring, Thanksgiving dinner in 2021 might end up being one of the priciest holiday meals on record.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. My name is James Lee. Welcome to my channel 5149, where I talk business, politics, and society. And today, I want to talk about inflation. Specifically, is the media misleading us about who is actually responsible for our more expensive turkeys and everything else that's gone up in price? And is there something we can do about it? An estimated 46 million turkeys are eaten each Thanksgiving in the United States. Wow, 46 million turkeys. I don't even know where to start with a number like that. 46 million turkeys. I don't even know where we get that from. Like, when I read a mind-boggling statistic like that, it really puts into perspective how much we as a species are consuming, pillaging the earth for what it's worth. There are turkeys out there, but thanks to supply chain disruptions and labor shortages that are plaguing countless industries, it's going to be a bit more challenging and more expensive to get one this year. I don't like the word shortage in this scenario. It's not like we forgot to start raising turkeys, said Trey Malone, an agricultural economist at Michigan State University. What's really happening is that you have these disruptions along the supply chain. It's not because there's no turkeys, it's that the turkeys are in the wrong places at the wrong time. Imagine 46 million turkeys running around in the wrong place at the wrong time, just wreaking total havoc. It can't be a good thing.
Pain at the pump.
Gas prices are bananas.
In the checkout line. And your favorite restaurants.
Everything's more expensive. Everything across the board.
In October, the Consumer Price Index jumping 6.2%, the largest annual increase in more than 30 years.
Right, so what exactly is going on with inflation? Well, it kind of depends on who you ask and who you watch, because for worse, definitely for worse, American news media outlets are typically aligned to one of the two big parties. It's either rah-rah for the Democrats or rah-rah for the Republicans. And every issue is dissected through the lens of how it impacts the electoral outlook of either of the two parties. So when discussing inflation, a pro-Republican outlet like Fox News will go something like this.
President Biden facing a nightmare come Christmas time. Thanks to rising inflation and a supply crisis, gifts are going to cost you a fortune. And where's Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg? He hasn't been to a White House briefing since this whole crisis started. And when he manages to get in front of a camera, he doesn't say much.
Wow.
Kind of a laid-back attitude from the administration.
Is there no urgency for anything?
No.
Like, why we just feel so much urgency? You are in these positions of power. You're in a position to do something, or at least let people know we care.
Sure. So what we're seeing right now is we're combining inflation with scarcity. This is a new thing. So we're finally getting the dystopia that the media said Trump was going to bring us, except it's old Joe who's bringing us Soylent Green.
One, you don't pay people to stay at home. So you have the labor shortage, but then you pay people extra, say unemployment that started earlier this year, it just expired, but you don't juice demand while supplies are tight. Everything described here in terms of the supply chain problems, the labor shortages, the spike in inflation is a self-inflicted wound by the Biden administration. It's intentional.
Right, it's the Democrats, it's Biden, it's his administration, it's the government giveaways, it's Buttigieg, et cetera, et cetera. Frankly, the Democrats are an easy target because A, they're in power, and B, they're generally not that competent, or more accurately, in my opinion, not the group that's necessarily incentivized to solve this problem. They're a pro-corporate party, and they think of these issues in terms of how it impacts corporations and not people. Now, the narrative of a pro-democratic outlet, if you watch one of those like NBC, goes a little differently.
This inflation is not in isolation, and the government predicted it was going to be a challenging recovery all tied to COVID.
The root cause of the inflation is the pandemic, particularly the Delta wave of the pandemic. It did a lot of damage to our economy, but it disrupted economies across the globe.
The shuttered economy meant millions out of work, laid off, or fearful of going to a job and being exposed. When the recovery started, many didn't return to their previous jobs, compounding problems that already existed pre-pandemic. The shift to online shopping left warehouses struggling to find enough employees. Consumer demand remains strong, and spending this holiday season is expected to set a new record. With the economy roaring back after the pandemic, higher prices are not a surprise.
It's not atypical to see inflation pop temporarily coming out of a downturn. We come a long way back from the dark days when the pandemic hit back in early 2020. We still got a ways to go.
Right. So in this case, it's not Biden or the Democrats. They're doing everything they can. It's all of these different externalities that they can't control. It's the pandemic. It's the Delta variant. It's changes in people's spending habits. It's normal. Inflation just happens after an economic downturn. But don't worry, all good. They're tackling it, but not really. So it's very misleading, all this reporting. But if we can trace back through the chain of command, figuratively speaking, to see who rules all of our media and government, the ones who can't be touched, it's corporations. Their role and responsibility are oftentimes completely absent from all of these conversations. You may be wondering what single force would cause the cost of a dairy product to go up at the same time as the cost of a car part. The truth is, not all inflation is the same. Each sector has its own issues. Some of it is what we call pandemic inflation, because our economy bounced back quicker after the COVID-19 shutdowns than anyone predicted. People have more spending money, and demand has risen faster than our underinvested supply chain could handle. Meanwhile, recent spikes on other goods that families depend on, like diaper, meat, and dairy, can be linked to corporate greed. Decades of corporations monopolizing industries and cutting out competition has given them the power to artificially inflate the prices of these necessities under the guise of inflation. Wow, so could it be that, yes, while we do have some price increases due to just fundamentals of supply and demand, at the same time, we also have some price increases that may be deliberate? Corporations are using inflation as an excuse to raise prices and make fatter profits, and it's making the problem worse. Corporations have a tendency to try and boost profit margins during periods of elevated inflation, the Wall Street Journal reported, and now is no different. Former U.S. Labor Secretary Robert Wright called this phenomenon a symptom of, quote, the economic concentration of the American economy in the hands of a relative few corporate giants with the power to raise prices. This is something that I've covered before in an early video of mine, and it's slightly different context. But what we have here is a rapid consolidation of corporations to the point where essentially there's only a few companies in every single industry. And we also have a marriage between corporations and the government via these political donations. So what they've been able to do is undermine our freedom of choice, and we've more or less given up all our power to the wealthy corporate executives and their shareholders. America's biggest companies can't stop bragging to investors about how they're charging you more. As companies reported third quarter earnings in recent weeks, several have appeared to brag about their ability to reach into your wallet without scaring you off. What we are very good at is pricing, Colgate-Palmolive CEO Noel Wallace said. Whether it's foreign exchange inflation or raw and packing material inflation, we have found ways over time to recover that in our margin line. So the name of the game for people who control the game is how we can move money from your pocket into ours, ideally without you really knowing who's pulling the strings. I want to really quickly return to the same NBC Sunday Today clip we watched earlier and point out a part where Stephanie Ruhle, the on-air personality, in what I think is an attempt to sound kind of profound and edgy, actually says the quiet part out loud.
The dirty little secret here, Willie, while nobody likes to pay more, on average, we have the money to do so. Household savings hit a record high over the pandemic. We didn't really have anywhere to go out and spend. And as we said a moment ago, we're expecting retail sales this holiday season to break records.
I don't know if she realized what she was saying or if it was said on purpose or not, but it's almost as if she, said that because corporations weren't able to extract money from you last year and think you have a lot saved up in the bank, they're going to try to take it from you this year. It can't really be a coincidence that corporate profits are at an all-time high in the middle of a pandemic. It's almost as if the pandemic was a good thing for corporate America and for wealthy elites. The stock market is up 23% since the Democrats took control of D.C. 10 months ago. Billionaire wealth is up 47%. When the GOP was in control, corporate and billionaire wealth also rose, plus they got $1.9 trillion in tax cuts. It's almost like one group always wins. Okay, so any time is a good time if you're wealthy, a high-ranking government official, or a corporation. And that's kind of my point. If the issue at hand has to do with money, whether it be inflation, trade, taxes, etc., the entrenched corporate media, because they are, after all, corporate-backed, are always going to try and pit people against each other. The Let's Go Brandons versus the Dump Trump folk. They'll do anything, make up whatever explanations they have to keep us from discussing who really calls the shots. And to me, that's where we need to divert our attention to if we're going to be serious about fixing something like inflation. That's it for this week. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. I just want to say, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, there's a lot I'm grateful for, and one of them is this community. Yes, it's super frustrating that there's so many things wrong with the system, but seeing the positivity in your responses gives me a lot of hope. So if you do support what I do here, please click on that like button, share this video, consider subscribing, maybe clicking on that notification bell icon so I can keep making more videos for you. Let me know what you want to hear about. Happy Thanksgiving. Hope everyone gets to spend some time with family and friends. I appreciate you for your time, and I'll see you next week.